Thank you, Carmencita. Welcome today to Jesus Sunday School class. We regularly hear that Jesus was called teacher or rabbi, but today's text gives us an inside look at how Jesus used parables to teach. Today's text has Jesus teaching the crowds with parables, followed by the after-school program for the disciples. We get the classroom instruction to the masses, and then some extra on the side for those who wanted to dive deeper, maybe, or those that he expected would get it and didn't. Either way, we get to see the telling of one of my favorite parables, the parable of the Sower. It's such powerful images, and there's so many different ways we can understand them. And in this one, unlike some parables, we actually get more explanation from Jesus about what some of the pieces might have meant. There's always more than one way to understand any parable, but in this one, Jesus kind of gives them a legend or a key to get started as they dive in on it, or at least one way they might interpret it at that time and place. Some of you may remember felt boards, the old Sunday school felt boards, little cutouts, fuzzy two-dimensional geometric shapes to represent Jesus and disciples and props. As we told the stories up on pieces of felt, they stuck together. And as Carmencita was reading the text today, there's something that jumped out to me in my study this week, and I don't know if you caught it or not, but it's like in this text we're seeing Jesus in a classroom. At verse 16, he actually, when he's explaining to the disciples, says, "These are the ones that." And then these are the ones that. And we're left to wonder what the these are. It's almost like he's pointing at something. Like he's got a felt board there and saying, these are the ones that are like this. And these are the ones that are like that. It's kind of interesting. What is he pointing at? I don't know about you all, but imagining Jesus with a felt board or with a bag of seeds and showing them, having some object lesson in his hand, is a completely different image of Jesus as teacher. Usually we think about Jesus standing on the boat and speaking, and the authority of his voice carrying the message. We think about Jesus as speaking, oratory, and that he was a teacher by the wisdom of what he said. But in this text today, in just a couple of words, so easily missed, and these are like these, those are like those. We have to wonder if Jesus was using props. Was he just an orator, more like a preacher as we would imagine? Or was he really more in the line with what we might imagine a teacher having? And if he is a teacher in that sense, I'm wondering what all's in his backpack? What's he carry around for lessons? Does he have little cutouts of the disciples to show them where they're supposed to go? Does he have a list of the commandments on little things that look like stones that he's written on? Think about the things you've seen in classrooms over the years, things teachers have used for props to get your attention, to make the lesson. Was this like a first century children's sermon as Jesus gathered around to play show and tell with everybody with what he had brought? Can you imagine Jesus sitting with a bag of seed, sprinkling some on the ground and saying, these are like the ones that hit the road. These are like the ones that landed in the thorns. Imagine Jesus actually sowing seeds as he talks about the parable of the sower. Now, there's a less comfortable explanation for this as well. We could look at this same language and think, maybe he wasn't pointing to seeds, maybe he wasn't pointing to props, maybe he was pointing at people. Think for a second how uncomfortable this lesson could be. He's sitting with the disciples afterwards, and he says, these people over here, they are like the seed that landed on the road. These are Satan's spawn. These over here are like the ones that got choked out by the thorns. They were a waste of effort. Now imagine who he might be talking about. He's talking to mostly poor, oppressed people. Imagine he says, y'all see the Pharisees over there? That's like the hard ground. You see the rich people and the tax collectors over there, that's like the thorns. And the disciples have to be going, shh, Jesus, it's not polite to point. And they could tax us more. Shh. That's my priest you're pointing at. But it would have been, as many parables are, turning the world upside down from what everybody expected, flipping the narrative on how we normally interpret these things. So whether Jesus is pointing at the seed, talking about the seeds as these, or he's talking about people as those, we get this different understanding of Jesus, this different vision of him as teacher. And imagine however he did it. However he taught the lesson, for those who felt oppressed, this was good news. This was good news. Yes, you can imagine the people shouting amen to Jesus. Yes, Jesus, that's hypocrisy and you've named it. Yes, Jesus, that's injustice as you've named it. Boo on the tax collectors, boo on the rich people that take advantage of us. But let's not forget, every parable has layers. As much as we might cheer and chant and shout amen at one layer of it, there's always another curveball that comes back to invite us to reflect a little deeper. Did you notice how easy these images are to see? Jesus uses images. They aren't mysteries. They're not vague. They're very tangible. The path is not a new path. It didn't appear overnight. It's a path that's been there. It's trod down, the ground made hard by people walking on it. The rocks weren't hidden. There wasn't dirt covering the rocks. They've been there. The thorns didn't just grow up quickly. They've been there. So why is the sower throwing seed in such horrible places for growing? Why is the sower preaching love in places it will surely be rejected? Why is the sower wasting all that precious seed? This is the sloppiest sower we've ever seen. For some of you who've lived life in other parts of the country or more rural places, this would be the worst farmer you've ever met. The seed just goes everywhere. Everywhere. This seed should be saved for the good soil. Can't we just not open the bag of seed till we get there? Can't we just make sure we're not wasting it as we go? Let's wait till we get to the field and then put the seed where it belongs, on the good ground, the places where it's going to grow. It makes good sense, good common sense. But then we remember the parable we read last week about the shepherd that leaves the 99 to go hunt for one. The story of what sounded like a really bad shepherd. And then we realize God's sense is not common. God's sense is not common, and it does not match our assumptions. Logic is not always part of God's way. If God is the sower, then this parable reminds us that God keeps sowing seed everywhere. Everywhere. God hopes for the best even when it looks useless. God offers love even when rejection can be assumed. If God is the sower, we are assured that God has plenty of seed. God has all the seed God needs. There is plenty of love for us and for others too. God has enough love to spill some out on the ground and have plenty without running out. If God is the sower, if God is the sloppiest farmer we've ever seen, we can take it as good news. Because when we are the hard ground, God keeps sowing, even on us. But what if God's not the sower? What if we're the sowers? What if we put ourselves into the place of the sower? If we are the sower, then we are challenged to share love everywhere. Even when we think it won't matter. Even when we're far from home and fear that we are among thorns. We are called to share love. If we are the sower, we're challenged to share love with everyone. Even when we think they will reject us. Even when we might be socially on rocky ground. We are called to love. But what if it's not us? What if others are the sower? It's so easy to put ourselves into the position of the hero in a parable, of the one doing good in a parable. What if others are the sowers and we are the ground? What if we're the ground? Then we are reminded that God's love will not give up on us. It will keep finding us. We are reminded that we can remove the rocks and till the packed ground. We are reminded that we can do some weeding and that we will trust others to not give up on us. We can be in communities of faith where when we have found ourselves hardened by life's journey, others will keep sowing seeds of love on us, sharing God's love with us. Lent is one of those seasons in the church that's hard to explain. It's filled with theological words and churchy words that to the outside world don't make a lot of sense. But maybe the best way to explain Lent is soul tending. Soul tending. Moving the rocks that have been in the way of our happiness or our contentment. Weeding out the thorns as we deal with the prickly parts of ourselves and learn to deal with the parts of others that can be sharp. Tilling our hearts, softening the places hardened by fear or selfishness. Lent is a time of soul tending. And while we must each choose how to practice Lent, we're not the only ones doing the work. There are others out there on the journey as well. Their journey is different than ours. We each walk the Lenten journey in our own way. But God invites everyone to take the journey, everyone to seek the transformation that we celebrate in Easter. God invites everyone to know love, constantly sowing it in all the wrong places. Just as soon as we get self-righteous and think Jesus is talking about those people when he says these seeds, when we start to get self-righteous and think Jesus is talking about these people when he's talking about these seeds, Lent reminds us that he could be talking about us. That he could be talking about us. What rocks and thorns need tending in your field? What hard places need to be loosened or plowed on your Lenten journey? Remember the promise. When the seed finds the soil that is ready, it will grow. When the seed finds the soil that is ready, it will grow. We can be the soil. We can be the seed. We can be the sower. We might be the harvest. But only if the hard work of soul tending has been done. On this Lenten journey, on this path to Easter, what will you be tilling? What will you be tending? What needs to be moved, churned, shifted? What needs to be weeded? As you do your soul tending, how will you prepare your soil for the seeds of love that fall all around? Amen.